Today on the Exercise is Health podcast, we have the distinct pleasure of interviewing Dr. Jody Stanislaw, who is a naturopathic doctor specializing in helping her patients manage type 1 diabetes. As a type 1 diabetic herself, Dr. Jody not only discusses her personal history and experience with type 1 diabetes, but also provides her perspective on how type 1 diabetics should be exercising, should be eating, and other lifestyle factors that will help them to manage their blood glucose levels better, as well as lead their best life overall. We're going to cue the intro song, and then we are going to cut right to our interview with Dr. Jody Stanislaw. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset. Your health is one of the biggest influencers of the quality and quantity of time that you have. And while there are many aspects of health, our expertise is exercise. Exercise has been proven time and again to not only increase your longevity, but improve your quality of life. And it's our opinion that the very single best thing that you can be doing to improve your health overall is exercise. Specifically, exercise that's geared towards improving the health and function of your muscles. Now, today we have a very exciting conversation for you. We'll be talking about type 1 diabetes, exercise, nutrition, lifestyle factors, and to guide us through this conversation, we are interviewing none other than Dr. Jody Stanislaw. Dr. Jody Stanislaw received her doctorate in naturopathic medicine in 2007, is a certified diabetes care and education specialist, and has lived with type 1 diabetes since the age of 7. Her TEDx talk, Sugar is Not a Treat, has over 2 million views. From her 35 plus years of experience, she teaches life-changing information about how to successfully manage type 1 diabetes that standard medical care often leaves out. Her consulting practice is virtual, so she works with type 1 diabetics located around the world. In addition to focusing on improving one's diabetes as a holistic physician, she also supports patients with critical lifestyle areas such as diet, exercise, sleep, and emotional health. Dr. Stanislaw has a series of virtual training courses covering how to avoid the blood sugar roller coaster, why carb counting doesn't work, how to master blood sugar during exercise, and how to stay positive and avoid burnout. Her latest project is a virtual membership program called the T1D Crew, a place for top-notch education and support. To learn more, visit www.drjodynd.com. Dr. Jody, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to our discussion.
Yeah, for sure. So you are a type 1 diabetic. I'm a type 1 diabetic. You were diagnosed at the age of 7. I was diagnosed at the age of 9. Tell me about kind of how your diagnosis influenced your childhood and then moving into, what you chose to do from a professional standpoint.
I was diagnosed in 1980 and I was in Seattle, and I spent a week at Seattle Children's Hospital, which is a phenomenal hospital. And as you probably know, you get super sick for about 24, 48 hours depends on how long you've been leading up to it, right? But within 24 hours of being at the hospital, you're fine. You feel better. And yet I got to stay there for a week because there's so much education that you need. And so I had so much fun. I was like in this big center and they had, paintings on the walls and arts and crafts. And it was 1980. I had cable on my bed. Right. I remember I was watching like Wizard of Oz in my bed. And I was like, nobody had cable at home back then. Right. And I just had so much fun. And the nurses and the doctors were nice. And so I thought, I want to be one of them when I grow up. I just want to help people feel good. Like that'd be a great job. And it's fascinating how something like that literally, every day, right? It just completely shaped things. If you turn right instead of left, changes your life.
Most certainly. So moving into your professional life, you wanted to become a doctor. Did you know that you wanted to specialize in diabetes care?
No, it's a great question. So for the next 20 years, I was kind of obsessed with, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. Every 7-year-old is asked, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I had the answer forever. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. And then, of course, I get to college and I think, that sounds like a lot of work. I don't know. Like that's like like 10 years of studying. I'm like, who does that?
Right.
And I also didn't really like any of the doctors that I went to. I, this is so common in the type 1 diabetes world that people are like, why do I bother going to my endocrinologist? Like they just look at my numbers and they don't really, they don't give me, they don't give me any education. Right. I mean, I hear that all over the world. Like, I don't know why I should go to my doctor anymore. I hear that all the time. And I was feeling that way too. I'm like, these are not the fun guys that were at the children's hospital. So I actually graduated college with a business degree and was kind of gutted because I thought, well, I guess that dream I had for 20 years is just not going to happen. I don't want to work that hard to be that miserable and spend that much money and time in this intense club that I don't know if I'm going to like when I get at the end of it. So I actually started working for Eli Lilly as a farm rep. And I was like, oh, I could just sell insulin and I could just educate people on insulin. And I just thought that would be like, I could still like inspire and teach and educate, which I love to do. But then within the first 5 minutes of getting that job, I realized that nobody really likes farm reps. They're just kind of like, get out of my office and will you drop me off some lunch tomorrow? And I was like, this is not the credible job that I was looking for. I didn't feel respected or cared about as an educator in the sales field. And ironically, I grew up in Seattle, and there is one of the best holistic medical schools in the country in Seattle. But I didn't grow up around holistic medicine. I grew up around conventional medicine. And I was 26, sitting in a waiting room, waiting to give samples of the drugs I was pushing to this doctor. And I picked up this magazine, and it was like Holistic Medical School in Seattle. And I thought, wait a minute, what is this? And so I immediately looked up, I think they had websites back then, right? They looked up, looked up a website? And maybe not. I don't know. I probably called them and made an appointment and drove out there. I was like, this is amazing. They're like, we train you as a primary care physician. You also get, a year of herbal medicine and homeopathy and exercises medicine. And, there's yoga as electives and Ayurvedic medicine is. And I was like, really? And I was like, what do I need to get in? And they're like, well, you need to have a pre-med degree. And I was like, gutted because I had given up on the pre-med classes. So I was like, well, okay, I'll be back in 4 years. So I made a 10-year plan that day. And I was like, I'm going to stay in sales for 5 years. Because you kind of have to take chem and then OChem and then physics. You can't like take them all at once. And so I was like, well, I kind of like my job. Well, no, I don't think I had that thought. I don't know why I didn't take them all at once. But I didn't. I felt like I only could take one at a time. So I spent 5 years in medical sales. After 3 years with Lilly, I was like, I can't take this anymore though. And I was just going to like work in a coffee shop and study. And then I got a headhunter call to sell insulin pumps. And I thought, ooh, I could do that. They actually need to talk to me and sit down and I can educate people on how to technically use it. So I actually put off school for a year and was an insulin pump rep for a year. And then I was like, and you're still not a doctor. You're still a salesperson, not living out your dream. So the second year of pump sales, I finished my pre-meds. I quit my job at the age of 30. I entered Bastyr University in Seattle at the age of 30, 5 years full time, got trained as a primary care physician with a holistic, focus, graduated at 35, and then thought, well, now what? I'm a free spirit. I love to travel. I don't want to be, a ball and chain of like a hospital job. And I got a job at a holistic health spa in Thailand. So that was my first job at med school.
That's awesome.
I was like, I could be a doctor at a 5-star health spa. Thank you very much.
Yeah, right.
I did that. I wrote a book about it. It's on Amazon. I lived in Bali. I met all the people that, Elizabeth Gilbert wrote about in Eat, Pray, Love, and then wrote my own Eat, Pray, Love book. And then I came back to the US in 2010 and I thought, okay, well, I really like to be free. How can I help people and be free? And I found this program that's like, do you want to help people online and have freedom? And I'm like, yes, I do. So then I signed up for this year-long program about how to build a business online. And they're like, well, you really need a narrow niche. I'm like, I'm a naturopath. They're like, that's not narrow. I'm like, I'm a women's health specialist. And they're like, nope. And I'm like, they're like, type 1. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? I think about that all day long already. And now I have to like have it be my career. And I resisted for months until I was like, that's kind of a brilliant idea. So that was 2012, 2013. And now I have probably 10,000 people around the world that follow me. And I've been working one-on-one with type 1s, hundreds of type 1s in 15 different countries. And I am, yes, I don't want to talk about diabetes all day, but I do, because my purpose in life is to help type 1s. And I'm really good at it, and I love doing it.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. And for our listeners that don't know, we got the scoop that Dr. Jody is currently in Hawaii. So she is truly a free spirit practicing online. I'd love to know more about your development of creating this business online and how what kinds of things did you have to change in your brain to start helping people online? Because normally people don't think of, I guess now with COVID times, we kind of think of it, but normally people don't think of like, oh, I have type 1. I need to, get some medical guidance. Let me find someone online.
Right, exactly. And a lot of my clients, when they were talking to their spouses and they're like, oh yeah, I'm working with my doctor. They're like, on Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to have that conversation anymore though, which is really nice. Yeah. So I took a year-long program. It was kind of like a mini business, a mini like MBA in online business. We had trainings. I flew to San Diego every other month for a year. I had small group trainings. We had video trainings every week. So I learned all about basic, create a website, have a free gift, collect emails, give away free content, do a webinar, offer something, and I was like, okay, well, I'll offer a series of 3 calls with me. And I'm like, I'm selling 3 calls with me, and this is what you get. And I'll show you how to get better A1C, right? And then the 3 calls turned into 12 calls, and I created a 3-month program, and I got more followers. And then I created like, hey, do you like the videos I'm sharing? Because and then I would get on telesummits. Getting on telesummits was one of the best ways. Mm-hmm. Actually, there was this doctor called Dr. Brian Mole, and he had this diabetes summit that he called it. It was mostly type 2, but when you throw the word diabetes out there, you inevitably catch some type 1s. It's 95% type 2 in the world, and only 5% of us, right? There's only like 5% of us with type 1. So it's a very different, and I'd love to explain to your listeners that when I finish this, what the difference is. So I got on telesummits, I got on podcasts. I mean, that's how you guys found me, right? You found me on the High Intensity podcast. Exactly. So I did a lot of video stuff out there, and people just were like, who's this lady? I want to talk to her. And then I had a website that was like, hey, click here to work with me. And then I have a little Google Doc you have to fill out that tells me about who you are and what your numbers are and, what your struggles are. So when I get you on that free call, I already know a lot about you. And then I go, okay, so I can sell you a 3-month package, or I have online courses, or I have my group program. And it just was, knocking on doors in a sense, knocking on that, hey, can I get on your podcast? Hey, can I get on your telesummit? Hey, can I write a blog for your newsletter? And here I am now with, it's awesome, with people around the world. I talked to a mom in Ethiopia the other day, and it was heartbreaking to me because she's on NPH for her kid. And NPH is such a bad insulin, and she can't get a better insulin. And she's like, well, should I work with you anyways? And I'm like, well, yeah, I can work with you, but it's just such an old school insulin. It's so frustrating. And then I sent supplies to this 21-year-old in the Philippines, and she was on the wrong insulin, and
So tell us more, because, well, at least for our listeners, kind of start to break down differences between type 1 and type 2, because that was one thing, like you were saying, 95% of the world that has diabetes is type 2, 5% is type 1. And I remember when I first heard you speak on that podcast, I was scrolling through, I was like, okay, podcast on diabetes. And it's like, oh, type 1. Oh, this is awesome. Because there's hardly any, promotional content out there about it. It's all about type 2. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of take a few minutes and for our listeners, kind of break down some of the differences.
Type 1 is an autoimmune disease. Type 1 is your immune system gets confused and it attacks yourself, right? So in our case, it attacked all of our insulin producing cells. And there's theories about why, but there's no this is why you got type 1. It's true with MS. MS attacks nerve tissue. Rheumatoid arthritis attacks joints. Lupus attacks connective tissues. There's all these different diseases that when the immune system just goes awry, right? And the difference between the unique thing about us is the total amount of insulin producing cells in the body only comes to about 2 grams. It's only 2 grams. Yeah. So you and I, our whole life is altered because we're missing 2 grams of these cells, right? And guess what? They're gone. They're gone. Well, when you have all those other ones, you have flare-ups, right? Because all of their nervous tissue cannot be annihilated. All of their joints connot be annihilated. All of their connective tissue, right? So there's ebbs and flows. Ours was like an attack and the war's over. It's just done now. We're no more war. We don't have flare-ups. So why, there's genetic theory, there's low vitamin D theory, there's like, you got a viral infection. There seems to be a higher rate of type 1 diagnosis in people that have had COVID. There's like anything that initiates a stress to the immune system, be it emotional, be it toxic, be it viral, lack of breastfeeding. I wasn't breastfed. I had low vitamin D. I have a lot of other theories. I had some emotional trauma. My parents were divorced, and I probably had I had tubes in my ears, which maybe some gut inflammation is the theory in that in the holistic world. And your gut is where your immune system lies, right? And then being given milk, at an early age has been a theory. I don't know where they're at with all of these data. Some show yes, some show no, but we don't know why. We don't know why I got it. I just have theories. And there's genetic predisposition, but not 100% in all people. And that's true with all autoimmune diseases are on the rise these days, though. Over 50% of people getting autoimmune diabetes are now over the age of 30. So I have so many patients that are 30, 40, 50, 60, and they got it 3 or 5 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So everything is, triggering our immune system these days to kind of go awry. There's a lot of toxicities and stress and, that in the world. So there's a rise in all autoimmune diseases. Frankly, I wish type 1 and type 2 were called autoimmune diabetes. And I don't know what the other one would be called, but the other one is type 2. Okay. Nothing attacked their cells. Their cells just wore out. Mm-hmm. They're just worn out. And guess what? If you stop overstressing your cells, you can not be sickened. You can reverse type 2, right? It's not a miracle. Like people are like, oh, it's a miracle. I'm like, well, I mean, if you're late stage and you don't have any more cells left and they come back, I suppose that's a miracle. But there's a lot of genetics but you cannot deny the effect of diet and lifestyle, right? The majority of type 2s, not all, but the majority have had an unhealthy diet, an unhealthy lifestyle. They're overweight. They have a lot of inflammation in their body and they don't exercise. Right? So guess what? When you don't take care of your body, it's not going to work well. That's it. And people are like, do you work with type 2s? And I'm like, no, I don't, because I don't really know what to tell them except just eat better and go work out. I mean, sure, there's medications and herbs and how to increase your insulin sensitivity. But there's when you're on insulin injections every single day, like you and I are, it's a lot more technical. There's a lot more involved in how to dose your insulin properly. And that's what I love to geek out about with people, is how to dose their insulin properly. And sure, some type 2s are on insulin, but that's because they've been damaging their cells for so long that just a tiny bit of their cells left, they have to be on insulin. Mm-hmm. But now they're so insulin resistant that when you and I give ourselves 2 to 3 units per meal, they're giving themselves 50 to 70 units per meal. So I try to be neutral. I try to be kind, but I'm a little judgmental because they have cells that they aren't taking care of. And I would love to have their problem because I know how to take care of my cells, but they're gone.
No, I hear you. And, that kind of leads right into what I want to ask you about with your TEDx talk. Sugar is not a treat. In that talk, you talked about the importance of limiting sugar intake, and not just people that have type 1 diabetes, but for all people. So can you kind of tell us about, some of the issues that you were seeing with excessive sugar intake?
Yes. I first of all, I love that title. It took me a long time to come up with that title, but it just captures what I'm trying to say. Obviously, you and I having been type 1 our whole life, sugar, it's never just been a thing that I could just eat and not think about, right? It's always on my radar. How much sugar's in that? How much sugar's in that? And we're not talking about just, cake and ice cream, right? We're talking about noodles. We're talking about crackers. We're talking about an apple. We're talking about blueberries. We're talking about bread. We're talking about rice. We're talking about curry sauce, that's got some sort of sweetness in it. And so I try to be understanding to the rest of the world that hasn't been this hyper focused on it. But frankly, that's a huge gift of diabetes, right? You become hyper focused on it. And the reality is humans have evolved for millions of years eating food from nature. That is what our body needs. We have this brilliant machine full of trillions of cells. And guess what? There are certain rules that need to be followed to take care of it. We need what I call the 4 pillars. We need the proper diet, which is nature-based foods. We need it to be exercised. We need to move it. We need to have some emotional health skills to not let our anger and our stress get the best of us. And we need to sleep. We need to rest, right? The 4 pillars: sleep, food, exercise, emotional health. And guess what? You have to obey those rules if you want your body to work. It's just like your computer. You can't put your computer in a pool and you can't drop it from 5 feet above, right? But it seems like people think that they can eat all these fake foods all day long, and then they wonder why our health statistics are horrible. I'm like, you're dropping your computer in the pool and wondering why it's got high blood pressure and high cholesterol. Like, you're not taking care of your body because you're eating foods that are full of sugar, that are made in a plant, and nobody's talking about it. We feed it to our kids. We feed it at school. We feed it at diabetes events. Have you been at diabetes events? And there's bagels and there's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, what? And then, I've taken photos of the food that was given at a 4-year-old's birthday party at the YMCA. Yeah. It was like pink and purple, freaking marshmallows and jelly beans. You guys, it's killing us. It's killing more people than COVID, I think, on a slower, heart disease. And it doesn't allow you to feel your best, which means it doesn't allow you to perform at your best, which means that we as a nation are underperforming in every single area of our lives. Because if you eat a bunch of sugar, your brain's not going to work. You're going to be moody, you're going to be grouchy. And it's like you're putting diesel in a regular engine. It's not going to work. Yeah. And why I'm so passionate about this is it's just not only accepted, but we use it as a treat. Oh, Merry Christmas. Here are some cookies. Oh, Happy Valentine's Day. Here's some chocolate. Oh, it's your birthday. Have this piece of crap cake. It's like, and I feel frustrated because I'm like the uptight, health addict. And I'm like, I think you guys are the crazy ones. Like, you're not following the rules of how to take care of your body, but it's just like everybody's become sheep. The whole world eats this crap, and everybody's like, oh, there's uptight Jody bringing her salad to the dinner party, So it just makes me sad that people aren't taking the proper care of their body. And sugar isn't just cookies and ice cream. Sugar is in so many of the yogurts and the cereals and the bagels and the granola and it's just everywhere. I mean, I heard McDonald's dips their fries in sugar. It's like,
gross.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's almost like what you're saying is you're doing what was intended to be done, and because of our culture and the way we eat and the way we function around treating our bodies is so removed from that. When we talk about people exercising, since that's our specialty, we're thought of like the weird ones, like, oh, wow, that seems like such a big deal. I'm like, it's like, our bodies are designed to move, we should move. Or, our bodies were designed to eat from the earth and the animals and the plants, and we should probably focus on eating that. Or even one of the things, so obviously we're very diabetes conscious in our house. We have a toddler, and actually I still breastfeed her. And so many times, there obviously you brought up the theory about, breast milk may prevent diabetes or whatever. So many times people are like, so when are you going to stop breastfeeding her? I'm like, I don't know, when she tells me she's done, I'm not giving her other milk. She's going to drink milk. It should be human milk. So I don't know. To me, that seems natural, So it is very interesting that when you kind of get down to almost like the basics of human self-care, we've become so removed from what is like the natural, original way. There are life-saving medications out there, and you guys as type 1 diabetics know that for sure. But there's also the basics of like, hey, do you eat well? Do you sleep? Do you take care of your mental health? Are you moving regularly? That's what we're designed to do. So I totally can relate with you on that. And it is funny that us just withholding those basics of human health makes us almost the weirdos.
We are. And And it's also made me sad that this doesn't become headline news when we have a pandemic going on.
Yeah.
Guess what? When you exercise and you sleep right and you eat well, guess what? Your immune system is a lot stronger. Just saying.
Exactly. So for type 1 diabetics, what is your approach when it comes to nutrition? I'm sure there's a lot of specificity based on the person, but some theories that have been thrown out there is like, well, you can eat whatever you want as long as you cover it with enough insulin. And, but I having heard you talk and having heard your content, I know that that's not what you believe in. So can you tell us more about kind of your approach when it comes to nutrition as it pertains to type 1 diabetes?
Well, my approach for nutrition as a holistic physician to the whole world is at least 80% of your food should be from nature.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
And then if you have type 1, your job will be easier if you eat low carb. That's it.
Yeah, straightforward enough. And that's kind of like what I was telling Julie is like, as soon as I put carbs in my body, that means I have to put insulin in my body, which means now all of a sudden there's a little bit of a guessing game going on because based on my physiology on that day, there's going to be some ebb and flow. So the more carbs I put in, the more of a guessing game it is. And so that's kind of what I've found. So that definitely makes sense to me.
It's that easy. I mean, well, it's not easy, but it's that simple.
Sure. Yeah.
I love to have dessert. I mean, I said in my TED talk, I love chocolate chip cookies. I love a fudge brownie sundae, but I have like fudge brownie sundae. I can't remember the last time I ate one, a year or two ago,
Sure.
But I'll have one if I want it, I'll have one and I'll have it in the middle of the day and I'll dose a ton of insulin and cross my fingers and hope I dose right. And then I'll go on a walk to make my insulin work better. And then I'll keep an eye on my glucose monitor. And then I'm either going to go a little bit high or a little bit low, or maybe I'll hit a home run.
Right.
When I eat a lot of high fat, it'll probably need another little bit of insulin, maybe an hour or two later. It's going to hang around longer. And I just keep an eye on it. And so I don't want to work that hard every day.
Right.
I want to just have my breakfast and go.
Yeah.
So I teach people that you can have your treats, but your job's going to be harder, a lot harder. And it's called the law of small numbers, right? Small inputs allow for small mistakes. Small amounts of carbs, small amounts of insulin, less chance of highs blood sugars and less chance for low blood sugars. So,
no, that makes sense. Totally.
And when you say, the less, have your treats, and why treats, I'm going to just cover that as sugar, which we just talked about how much that is in the American diet. But just for our listeners that are, maybe you're brand new to this, if you think about the normal American diet, we're waking up maybe having, one of those fruit yogurts or a bagel or, some cereal, maybe the healthy, quote unquote, healthy cereal. Okay, so there was a large bolus of a quote unquote treat, meaning sugar. And then your morning snack, what did you have? A healthy granola bar, or maybe you're not that health conscious and, you're eating whatever, a muffin that was brought to the office because, we got to socialize at the office and then lunch comes around, and you're going to Panera, which is, fresh, quote unquote. And, you're having the sandwich and you might as well, get the apple as the side. And there is your next bolus of quote unquote treat. So this is a lot to really manage for people, even when we're not thinking about the brownie sundae. It's so infiltrated into our society and culture and how we're living life these days. So I just wanted to share that as perspective in case you are new to like thinking about food this way. I feel like I don't have to live that way specifically, but I try to be that way, just because I live with Charlie, obviously. So just being aware of those things and him needing to know what's in things or what is the serving size for that, rice that I served.
That's why type 2 diabetes is on the rise, because people are eating that way. They have sugar for breakfast and they have sugar for lunch and they have sugar for dinner and they have sugar for snacks and they have sugar for treats and they do it again. If you play too much tennis, you're going to get tennis elbow. If you eat too much sugar, your cells are going to be like, I can't make it, because every time you eat sugar, you have to make insulin, make insulin, make insulin, make insulin, make insulin, and you only have 2 grams of these little cells. 2 grams, right? So you make insulin, and so basically type 2s, a lot of it is like, I can't make enough insulin for you anymore. Because guess what? You're dropping your computer in the water, and it's not going to work when you do that.
Yep. Now, or go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I have a question. So you were talking about one of the best things about, monitoring your sugar when you're type 1 is that you have, less to deal with, right? It's a less of a guessing game because you're not having to bolus, as much insulin when you eat low carb. Yes, I'm sorry. Is there a negative health repercussion for the bolus of insulin / exogenous insulin, meaning like the fake stuff?
No. We're just replacing what we don't have.
Okay.
So we're just replacing what we don't have. So, I say diabetes doesn't damage you. High blood sugars damage you. Not having insulin doesn't damage you when you replace it appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
If you can keep your numbers in range and your A1C, 6.5 or even below 6, you're not going to have diabetes complications, right? Assuming you've been under 6.5 from the day you were diagnosed forever,
Sure,
right?
right.
But high, which I don't know anybody, but just as high blood sugar levels damage the body, not just having, so we're just replacing our insulin. But yeah, if you eat a diet where you need 100 units of insulin, that's a problem.
Yeah.
If you have a diet where you need like 30 units a day, that's what you guys make in your pancreas.
Now, Dr. Jody, I want to also touch on the importance of exercise as it relates to type 1 diabetes, because I feel like this can be a point of contention sometimes with type 1 diabetics. There's a concern, obviously, of not going low while they're exercising, but then there's also the idea of, especially like around resistance training, well, if I lift weights, that's going to send my blood glucose levels high. Like I've heard kind of both ends. So can you speak to your experience, not only with yourself personally, but also with the patients you've worked with?
Absolutely. So the whole reason why I'm online and I've created this membership program is because type 1s need better education. They don't know how to dose appropriately to avoid highs and lows when you exercise. But that aside, exercise is the most powerful medicine we have for everybody. I don't care if you're type 1 or not. It helps so many different conditions. It helps all your organs. It increases circulation. Your circulation is the super high for nutrients to get to every single cell in your body. And when you exercise, you increase the removal of waste, you increase the oxygenation, you increase, cellular turnover in a positive light. It's essential. And when you have a chronic condition that we all know, I haven't had a perfect blood sugar level every single day of my life. This has done plenty of damage to my body. Now, I don't suffer anything right now, but just I know that my sugar levels were out of control in the 80s for 10 years. And, anyways, you need to take care of your body. And when you have a chronic condition, you need to take even more care of your body.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have proper education to know how to deal with the highs and lows. And that's what I offer. Like, yeah, it kills me when so many people are like, oh, I'm not going to exercise, I'm going to go low. I'm like, well, you don't have to go low. Like, I just went on a 2-hour walk yesterday. My sugar level was 85 the whole time. And I didn't eat anything.
That's
right. Awesome. I learned I spent my whole childhood stuffing my face because the only thing they told us was, oh, when you exercise, eat more. Oh, when you exercise, eat more. Oh, when you exercise, eat more. Nobody said, oh, hey, so this is how your insulin works. And this is what you need to do differently. And then you need to change the dose here. But I don't have to eat anything anymore if I hike for an hour or two because I know how to do it differently. So I want people to know that exercise is your best friend. And if you're scared of highs and lows, reach out to me and I'll show you how to deal with them.
No, that's wonderful. That's when that online community sounds so incredibly not only just important, but helpful for people with type 1 diabetes to understand that, for parents with children that have type 1 diabetes, and in trying to get them to understand the importance of making sure their kids are physically active and not being scared to do so, not being scared to have their kid, well, I don't know if, recess is in session right now, but, run around at recess and, not be scared that they're going to have a reaction when they do that. Like that's huge.
100%. That's why I'm so on this mission to reach thousands of patients around the world, because there are how many tens of thousands of parents not letting their kids go exercise,
Right.
because they're afraid that their child's going to have a seizure and a low blood sugar, which they might if they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But it's not inevitable.
Now, can we touch on resistance training as it relates to type 1 diabetes? I've heard you speak a little bit about this in the past, and especially when it comes to actually being able to build muscle and how muscle more muscle, insulin sensitivity, things along that for type 1 diabetics.
Sure. Well, too much insulin, like over 30 units, over 40 units, does create inflammation in the body. You also have to wonder how many highs are they having, or how many carbs are they eating? And, most carbs are not plant-based, right? The easily accessible ones, right? So although I'm not that worried about people, you don't want to be on too much insulin, right? The more muscle mass you have, the more insulin sensitive you are. So if you start gaining muscle, your insulin needs will decrease, right? So if you're already in a healthy range of insulin, if you were on 25 units a day and now you're on 20, it's not going to really make that much of a difference. But we all know that exercise is the most powerful medicine, be it your cardiovascular system or having more muscle tone. I mean, I don't need to go over, I'm sure your listeners know, or you guys know, the 5,000 bullet points about the benefits to your health of having more, muscle mass in your body, right? So we want more muscle mass in the body because it's taking care of the machine properly, right? The machine likes to have that tone. And as a type 1, when you have more, you will need less insulin and your blood sugars will be better managed because you're just a more efficient machine, right? You used to need 4 units for this meal. Now you only need 2 units, which means you're just playing in a tighter window of blood sugar. Basically, muscles like to eat glucose, right? That's one of our major glycogen storage areas in the body. They like to eat glucose. So guess what? When you're a type 1 and you have more muscle mass, you have helpers eating your sugar. You need less insulin because guess what? Insulin's job is to take the glucose out of the blood. But if you have hungry muscles, they'll take it out without insulin.
Yep.
They can just eat. They're like diabetes helpers. They're like, oh, you don't make insulin? No problem. I'm going to eat up the sugar for you, even without insulin. I can eat sugar and I don't even need insulin. So not only, but yes, there is that kind of like adrenaline spike, high blood sugar that you can get if you're just doing this really high anaerobic, kind of workout. But there's ways to manage that. But 24 hours a day, when you have more muscle mass on your body, 24 hours a day, you need less insulin.
Yeah.
You need less insulin. And like I said, you have helpers. You have helpers that are going to eat up your glucose, especially right after your workout and potentially for 12, 24 more hours after your workout. You have a higher degree of insulin sensitivity just per workout, not to mention 24 hours a day when your lean muscle mass just increases in general.
Yeah.
Right?
That's huge. That's really, really important for people to understand. Thank you for breaking that down for us.
Yeah, it will change them in the moment. It'll change them during the workout. They might go high. After the workout, they might go low. But 24 hours a day, regardless, when you have more muscle mass, you're just more efficient at using up your sugar.
I do want to highlight, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think I have this right. But that would apply to every human, whether they have type 1 diabetes or not. It's like, hey, we have this chronic issue in our world right now where we eat like crap, and people that are seemingly quote unquote healthy regularly go to their doctor and they're like, hey, you're getting insulin resistant, and people are blown away by this. But I think we have a chronic issue. Everyone knows the diet is the thing, but what people don't know is that we're under muscled almost. We need to be building more muscle, and it is so underrated. And I think that if we could understand, like, hey, we all need to build muscle, whether you have type 1 diabetes, whether you're a regular, you don't have type 1 diabetes, but you're just trying to be healthy, you need to be building muscle. And I think especially when we're told, oh, you need to be watching your blood sugars, they should really be told, yeah, you should probably change your diet, but you also need to be building muscle, because so many people are currently not focusing on building muscle. And the exercise industry, to be quite honest, is really all about, I think, general movement. And we spend a lot of time moving in ways that aren't necessarily building our muscle, which can have value, but we also need to be thinking about, okay, how can I build? How can I be building and not, what would that word be? Like weaning muscle or
just like using your muscle.
Yeah, using your muscles.
Well, hey, guess what effective treatment is for type 2 diabetes?
Getting up and moving.
Build more muscle.
I love it. Building muscle for sure.
Because now they're building up their sugar eating ability. Yeah. Right? The muscles are hungry for glucose. They'll eat it up.
Makes sense. Totally makes sense. Now, Dr. Jody, let's talk about the other two pillars that you brought up. So we've touched on nutrition. We've touched on exercise. You've also talked about sleep and emotional health. So what are the roles of those in terms of managing type 1 diabetes?
You have better insulin sensitivity when you get good sleep, period.
Cool.
And then, of course, that leads into making better health choices, better diet choices. You know, now you're going to actually exercise. Now you're actually going to make your salad. Now you're actually going to cook your veggies. It's just a whole domino effect when you're well rested of which way it's going to go. You're well rested, you make better choices. You're not rested, you make poorer choices, health wise and emotional wise, right? So sleep is when our body repairs itself. You know, it's like you get your oil change in your car, you get the, 10,000 mile checkups, we sleep every night. The body is a machine and it needs to have that repair time, right? When you wake up tired because you didn't sleep well enough, it's because all of your cells didn't get enough repair. Now you're headed out and your cells are like, I'm like inflamed. I didn't get repaired last night. And now you want me to work again. So sleep is just, and yes, you can have higher blood sugar because it's a stress to the body. To be unrested is a stress to the body. And anytime there's a stress to the body, you have higher cortisol. And higher cortisol creates insulin resistance. It increases your blood sugar. It actually tells the liver to put glucose into the bloodstream. There's plenty of ways our blood sugar can rise based on the hormones. And that brings me to the emotional health part. Being relaxed and being happy and feeling love and feeling gratitude. We all know it's like lower blood pressure, lower risk of heart disease, lower risk of headaches, less inflammation in the body. It's a direct influencer on our health, on our machine, right? And so if you're stressed and angry and, your cortisol is going to go up, your blood sugar is going to go up. And so the two are very closely related, but they're a key essential part of keeping blood sugar low, keeping your cardiovascular system healthy, keeping your inflammation down, keeping your insulin sensitivity high. It's just like the rule book for the body that none of us got.
Sure. Yeah, no, it totally makes sense.
And rest is, again, one of those basic ways that we need to take care of our health that I think is really underrated. And it should be like one of those questionnaire questions when you go to the doctor, and they never ask about your sleep. And one thing I've learned about being a mom, we have a toddler, she's almost 2, but the great thing about being a mom to a baby or a toddler is that there's no filter. And everyone knows that if a baby or toddler is underslept, they're going to let you know. But here's the thing. Every baby and toddler, however they're feeling due to their circumstances, we actually all feel that way. But we just know how to regulate our outbursts. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like so often we all are operating on this under-rested, time to heal and repair time. And if we were babies and toddlers, we'd all be having tantrums all day. But that's why I actually, as a mom, I'm like, thank God I'm a mom, because now I don't get mad when babies and toddlers are screaming, because, we would all feel that way given their circumstances.
Such a good analogy. I love it.
So, Dr. Jody, that's actually a perfect segue into the next question that I wanted to ask, which kind of deals with the support system of type 1 diabetics. And with most type 1 diabetics being diagnosed in childhood, parents are a huge support system and have a huge influence over, their children's ability to manage their type 1 diabetes. So, talk to us about that role that parents can play in helping their children better manage type 1 diabetes. And, are there any action steps that you would suggest parents start taking, shortly within that, that initial diagnosis, that almost honeymoon period?
Well, that's a really powerful question. But first of all, join something. Don't do it by yourself. Join my crew, join my type 1 diabetes crew, or because my crew is for patients and those that love us. That's kind of the tagline, for patients and those that love us or care for us. Don't try to do it by yourself. And one of the best things that my parents did is they never made me feel like what I got sucked. They're like, oh, you have diabetes now. Okay, so this is what we do now. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what I do now. I do a shot. And I thought I was super cool. I was like, I do shots. Do you? I was like, I loved it. I was like this special person. I got to go to the nurse's office and, eat special treats when I was low. And they never like, oh, poor Jody. Oh no, this is horrible. Your life's been ruined. Like, I've seen some of these parents have the kids write these letters, when they're wanting to raise money, and they write the letter about how much their life sucks. And I'm like, please don't do that.
Yeah.
Please do not do that. Your child has a challenge, just like the rest of the world gets challenges. And you get to be the model of saying, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're doing it. And you're going to become stronger because of it. So like the most important thing for them to do is model that. Don't feel sorry for them. So many people are like, oh, I'm so afraid of my child to give shots. I mean, they just, they have to give them shots. And guess what the kid hates? The kid hates shots. I'm like, you know what? You know why the kid hates shots? Is they are mimicking your energy. Like, oh, mommy hates shots. I hate shots. I hate shots. Right. So don't put your own fears on your kid. Right. Just let them be like, okay, you got this. But of course, your child gets a chronic disease. You're going to freak out as parents. It's horrible. That's like, don't do it by yourself. Right. Join my crew, join a group, something, but get education. If you're having tons of highs and lows, you are not well educated. You didn't get the education you need. Do not accept that. Do not accept high blood sugar levels in the low all the time. You've got to reach out to me, or, I would love to say, just reach out to your healthcare team, but we all know there's plenty of healthcare teams that aren't going to be able to help you. So it is manageable. It is not algebra. 1 + 1 with diabetes doesn't always equal 2, and 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. I call it, we're navigating a ship. And the wind is different every day. And sometimes you have a lot of food, and sometimes you have a little food, and sometimes you exercise, and sometimes you don't exercise, and sometimes you're stressed, and sometimes you're not. So, the doctor likes to make us think that managing type 1 is like, oh, what's your insulin to carb ratio? Okay, 1 to 15 grams. Well, you eat 45 grams and you take 3 units. I'm like, yeah, not that simple.
Yeah, exactly.
So 2 things, emotional health, do not put them on, make them feel strong, and get education.
I love it. I love it. Very important on both fronts. Absolutely. Yeah. So what would you tell a newly diagnosed type 1 diabetic kind of about what they can expect for their life going forward?
I'd give them a book by a patient of mine that says why having a chronic disease is one of the best tools for having an awesome life. And he has a chapter on each adjective. He has a chapter on courage. He has a chapter on discipline. He has a chapter on, empathy. He has a chapter on critical thinking skills, right? He has a chapter on adaptability. And I'm not going to say it's like, none of us want it. Sure. I mean, if you're like, hey, just go over here and you won't have it anymore, I'll be like, I am sorry. I'm pushing everybody down, and I'm going to be first in line.
Right. I hear you.
I mean, yeah, it sucks, but don't make it suck.
Yeah.
Get education, get support, have your pity party. That's fine. But, you have diabetes, people. Sorry.
Right.
It sucks. But, at least you don't have all the other crazy stuff out there that would, like, I don't know, this one's manageable. I mean, I've traveled the world. I've lived in 15 countries. I've climbed mountains. I've competed in athletic events. It's a lot of diseases that won't let you do that.
Exactly. Well, and kind of like what we've been saying the whole time, like in this conversation, the overarching recipe is live a healthy lifestyle. Like, you do the things that, you're supposed to do from a healthy lifestyle standpoint, and your quality of life more times than not is going to be pretty good. Yeah, there are going to be days that don't go over as well, but overall things are going to be much better and much more manageable.
Because you're taking care of your machine properly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Most certainly.
One thing, as you were talking about that book your patient or your client had wrote, is that I learned about type 1 diabetes through Charlie is it's interesting how we all have unique machines. We all have unique bodies. And Charlie and all type 1 diabetics, if they are monitoring their blood sugars, can tell when there's an added stressor to his body. Like just the other day, he found this cool thing at the store. He's like, I'm going to try this. It's going to, maybe it's going to help my health. I don't know. We're always testing things out. And, a week and a half later, he's like, one of the indicators of my health that I have that, me, Julie, not being type 1 diabetic, doesn't have is I don't check my blood glucose levels, and he does. And he could see when there's like an added stressor, which is actually kind of cool. And and some people, we don't find out, or we don't listen to our, different sensors in our body or our feedback in our body, but he has a very direct one. And all type 1 diabetics have a very direct way of like, wow, the way I used to manage blood sugar is now way weirder, way more off. And I don't know how to, and so I think that's kind of a cool thing that I've got to observe and learn about type 1 diabetics is that, you get this immediate feedback and this, week-long feedback or whatever.
Charlie, do you have a continuous glucose monitor?
I've used one off and on. I'm waiting for, without being too, brand specific, whatever, for Dexcom's new one to come out. I think it's like their 7G or something. And I think I'm going to switch over to that because the one that I was using seemed less than accurate more times than not. So that's what I'm waiting for is that new Dexcom to come out.
Even non-diabetics should try a continuous glucose monitor. I think it's fascinating to see what your glucose levels do all day long. Right. And for those of you listening, Charlie and I have had to poke our finger a bazillion times a day for decades. What's my sugar level now? What's my sugar level now? Oh, I had a big dinner. I better set my alarm, wake up at 2 a.m. What's my sugar level now? Right. Well, now we just wear this little filament that we insert under our skin and then have the little monitor app on our phone. And we get constant readouts 24 hours a day of what our numbers are doing. And which is awesome because you see exactly what a meal does to your blood sugar or what stress does to your blood sugar, right? Like I was super stressed this morning and my blood sugar went from 80 to 184 in 20 minutes.
Yep.
Right? Straight up. Like, okay, Jody, deep breath, calm down. So many people that didn't think they have blood sugar problems, they wear this thing and they're like, oh my gosh, look at my blood sugar. Right. And I've put it on some people and people are like, oh, I have the worst low blood sugar. I get low blood sugar issues all the time. And I put it on and I'm like, no, you don't.
Exactly.
It's the beauty of getting factual information rather than our assumptions sometimes.
For sure.
So many people are like, oh, I'm hypoglycemic. I'm like, okay.
So, Dr. Jody, is there anything that we have not asked you that we should have asked you about your area of expertise, about how you work with your patients, about type 1 diabetes that you think would be really good for our listeners to know right now?
Well, if anybody is struggling with type 1 diabetes or knows somebody that has type 1 diabetes, please reach out to my website.
And where can they find out more contact information for you?
Right. Well, sometimes I'll just say all you have to do is Google Dr. Jody and the word diabetes. If you just Google that anywhere in the world, so in case you don't remember my website, you can Google Dr. Jody diabetes and I come up. Yep. But my website is Dr. Jody ND, N naturopathic. So DrJodyND.com. And my type 1 crew is there. Work with me is there. My courses are there. And I'm on a mission to make sure that type 1s feel supported and educated, that they can get an A1C near 6% or lower and aren't burnt out and going blind.
Yes, exactly. Right. I love it. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. So the question that we like wrapping up with for all of our guests is, Dr. Jody, what is your definition of health?
Ooh, I like that. To be honest, feeling awesome mentally and physically.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Physically and mentally, I feel awesome. You can be in a hospital bed. You can be in a wheelchair. You can have had the best night of your life and be exhausted. But if you feel awesome physically and mentally, like that is the goal.
Mm-hmm.
That is the goal.
That's fantastic.
I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Dr. Jody, thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise with us. We really appreciate it. And I mean, this conversation for me personally, and I know Julie, is just fascinating. And yeah, just thank you for sharing your stories with us.
I'm so glad you guys found me, and I hope I inspired your listeners. That's what I'm all about. Is I love to share and educate and inspire. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Our pleasure. Well, take care, and we will definitely be in touch soon. Hey there, it's Charlie again. One last thing. I want to let you in on a secret project that I've been working on for quite some time now. I am planning on releasing a book by the middle of summer 2021. But here's the thing, because I'm self-publishing this book, there's only going to be a limited number of copies available at any given time. So to learn more about this book and to be one of the first to find out when this book actually gets released, what I need you to do is go to exerciseforlifemethod.com. There you'll find out more information as well as some exclusive bonuses that I'm offering just for simply staying in the loop with what's going on with this book. So to learn more and claim your bonuses, go to exerciseforlifemethod.com, enter in your information, and you'll be automatically kept up to date. Learn all about the book and bonuses at exerciseforlifemethod.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Cates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guests' qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.